Well, thank you everyone for coming. We're thrilled to have you all here, and we're delighted to have a wonderful panel of some of our alums. And we have many people online. So we actually have more people online, I think, than we have in the room. So, and people online, we're delighted you can be here as well. And please feel free to ask questions, and Samir will be fielding questions during our Q&A. We have a wonderful group of alums, as I said, and I should say that we're recording this event also, so just FYI. Rather than introduce everyone by me, I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And why don't we first have everyone just go down and just say, and we also, by the way, have Arielle Hellman online, so thank you for that. So why don't we start with Patrick. First, just everyone just say a sentence, who they are and what they do, and then we'll come back and have everyone talk in more detail.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Patrick Crooks. I graduated from the master's program here in 2013. So I feel like I'm one of the older alumni here, but we'll see. I currently work at a company called IQVIA. It's the largest contract research organization in the world. And I'm part of the patient-centered endpoints group. So in a nutshell, what I do is I help pharmaceutical and biotech companies make their clinical trials more patient-centric.
Great.
Hi, I'm Christopher Leech, and I started with Patrick, but submitted my thesis a little bit later. And I work for Brookdale Senior Living, which is the largest senior housing provider in the country. And I'm the manager of resident technology for them. So my focus is bringing in technologies to improve the experience of aging within our communities.
Hi everyone, my name is Derek Ayeh. I graduated from the master's program in 2015. And I currently work for an organization called the Medicare Rights Center. It's a nonprofit organization that mainly works with advocacy and policy work for Medicare beneficiaries, and I work on the policy side of that.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrew Rock. I graduated from the Bioethics Master's Program in 2016, and I currently work at an oncology data startup called Flatiron Health. They're owned by Roche Pharmaceuticals, some of you might have heard of it. But my role within the company is more operations management, so focusing on we have a process dedicated to converting unstructured medical records into structured data sets that can be used by researchers and quantitative scientists. So my role involves managing the operations and processes of our abstraction workforce, as we call it.
Hi everybody, my name is Lillian Ringle. I graduated from the program in 2015, and I am a staff attorney in the health law unit at the Legal Aid Society here in New York, which is the oldest and I think largest legal services organization in the country.
Hi, I'm Paola Nicolas. I didn't graduate yet. I'm a clinical and researcher fellow at Montefiore Hospital, Center for Bioethics. Actually, I've just started 2 months ago. Basically, I'm still in the middle of a transition between the master program in itself and a more permanent job. And I am having a training in clinical ethics consultation at Montefiore Hospital.
Hello everybody, I'm Marilyn Eshikena. I graduated the program in 2015 and I currently work at Mount Sinai at the IQVIA.
Good. And Arielle, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We can't hear you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, hi everyone. I'm having a hard time hearing you, but you all look terrific. Just nod if you can understand what I'm saying. All right, cool. So I'm in San Francisco. So my name is Arielle Hellman, and I'm the global head of bioethics at Genentech, a biopharmaceutical company, which is also a part of Roche Pharmaceuticals. I heard somebody on the panel from there as well. Nice to see you. And I graduated from the program in just last year. It was a pleasure to be a part of the program. And I'm a physician scientist. My specialty is immunology and rheumatology, and I was a practicing physician and also an academic physician, and I came to industry close to 14 years ago in order to develop medicines for people with serious rheumatic diseases. And so essentially became a clinical researcher and a drug developer. And in doing that work, I noted that there were quite a number of ethical issues, particularly in clinical research, but also in interactions that were somewhat unique to industry, where clinical research is sometimes in the interests of individual patients, or sometimes in conflict with interests of populations. And also we have complex government regulations that we have to take into account, and also some business considerations. And sometimes the ethics and the policies in all of those areas might be either in conflict or confusing or in need of a change because we have a new technology that we're working with. And as you can imagine, ethics plays a role in all of that. And so I became kind of deeply interested in ethics as a tool and a framework to solve problems and to make difficult decisions. And then became kind of a self-taught in bioethics, and started a bioethics dedicated group in our company, and then decided, and also maybe had a little bit more time for the first time in many years to really acquire some formal training, so that I'm not only self-taught, but I also have the sort of live, active teachings of others, and some academic experience in the area. And so I took that on a few years ago, with Bob Klitzman's encouragement. Reached out to Bob, and he kind of talked to me about the program. And so it was terrific that I got to be a part of it. And it has helped me in many ways. It's really helped me to think through problems in different ways, and also to acquire a new kind of vocabulary and language for when I work with others and with other experts in the area. It's very nice to see you all, and thanks for having this alumni event.
Great, well, thank you. So I asked each of the speakers if they could be prepared to answer 3 questions, and obviously some of you have already begun to talk about this a little bit, but what are you now doing in bioethics? How you got there, what path you took, and any advice you would have for our new graduates interested in entering or working in the field. And I should say that I think one thing you can see is that most jobs in bioethics don't have the word bioethics in them. So people may be working in compliance, it may be health law, it may be research ethics, clinical ethics, it may be clinical research organizations, patient-centered care, working on Medicaid rights, aging, et cetera. Why don't we go ahead, I think, and Patrick, why don't you start, and on any of these, or all these points, whatever you'd like to say.
Sure. I went through a few different phases of what I was interested in. I remember for a while I was really interested in kind of physician-patient communications and patient experience. So one thing I really like about my job right now is, like I said, it's all, my group at my job is focused on incorporating the patient experience and amplifying the patient voice in clinical research. Right now, in clinical trials, most endpoints are typically based on clinical endpoints. So if you think of oncology, you think of tumor reduction, and you also think of extension of life. However, the FDA and other regulators are now interested in not only these standard endpoints, but also more patient-centric endpoints like symptom reduction, lower symptom burden, and higher quality of life. So now what my group is trying to do is help more clinical trials incorporate these various patient-centric endpoints, like I said, symptom reduction, quality of life, and capturing patient-reported data. To usually they end up being secondary endpoints in clinical trials. So what I like about my job is I actually talk to a lot of patients out there with all different kinds of diseases and understand what is it like having this disease? What symptoms do you experience? How does this affect your life? I just wrapped up a project on small cell lung cancer that was very difficult, speaking to patients with extensive stage 4 small cell lung cancer and understanding what is it like to have this. So that way we can go back to our client and say, patients with small cell lung cancer experience XYZ, and you should be measuring XYZ in your clinical trial as a way to capture more patient-centric information and data, so that not only you can you evaluate if the patient's lives are being extended, but how is their quality of life when they're on an experimental treatment. If it just extends life, but your life and your quality of life is miserable for that extension of life, is that really benefiting the patient? So. One thing I like about my job now is just the focus on the patient, and that definitely came through in the bioethics program. A lot of our classes we talked about, obviously, clinical ethics consult. It's really ultimately focused on the patient. So that's certainly one aspect of my job that I try to bring in that bioethics training, try to bring that patient-centric view at my work.
So any suggestions, advice for people leaving our program and looking for jobs?
Yeah, I think especially when I graduated, I had very minimal work experience at that point. So especially if you're more of an entry-level applicant, the first question when someone looks at your resume is going to say, what is bioethics and why are you doing it and what do you want to do with that? So I really practiced my elevator pitch. I said, I'm Patrick, I come from this background, I studied bioethics because of this. I see myself using my training at this job in this way, and I feel like really practicing that and nailing that down really helped me in interviews, as well as the Columbia name. I won't discount that. I feel like that helped me get my foot in the door, and I'm thankful for that Columbia name that really carries a lot of weight. But yeah, practice your elevator pitch because, like Dr. Klitzman said, most job titles don't have bioethics in it. Some do. But most of the time, you're still going to have to explain yourself and this field to whoever is interviewing you. But if you come prepared with the knowledge and the assertiveness of why you're studying this and how you want to take what you've learned to your job, then it'll really, I think, impress your interviewers because of how interdisciplinary it is. I think that really resonated well with potential employers.
Great, thank you. Christopher?
All right, I think luckily the echo's done now because I probably would freak out if that was happening. So like I said, I work for Brookdale Senior Living. We have just over 1,000 communities across the United States that span the continuum of care. So we have large independent living with younger seniors who are kind of like retirees. We have assisted livings for people that need a little bit more help, and then we have memory cares for folks with dementia. And then we also have skilled nursings, and then we also have a subset of our business that's focused on hospice and in-home care as well. I got interested in bioethics, I think, in relation to kind of being interested in aging. So I basically kind of grew up working with seniors. My great-grandfather lived with my family. He had Alzheimer's disease, and so I kind of became familiar with the population that way. Visited him once he moved into a community and kind of got interested. And started volunteering as a high schooler, and then actually got hired as a caregiver for a nonprofit adult day program focused on dementia care. So I did that through high school and college, and then when I graduated college, I ended up managing a dementia care community that's actually now a part of my company. And so I did that for 2 years, and that experience of kind of overseeing a team of caregivers and med techs and working with families and dealing with hospice and residents passing away and kind of being there in the room made me kind of want to take a step back and kind of think, what is the best way to deal with this problem that is so widespread? And so that's kind of how I got interested in bioethics, and I found the bioethics program and came here. I would say for me, I would echo a lot of what Patrick said, and I think for me, the interdisciplinary nature of the program was really interesting to me. So I took a lot of classes in psychology, and I took a health law class. I took a aging in psychology and then a technology in psychology class. And that's when I started getting interested in, just seeing all these issues that are coming up in bioethics. A lot of it has to do with technology and the way that the world is changing. And then that coupled with knowing, this huge demographic shift that's happening. And I thought, well, people frame aging as a problem, right? They call it the silver tsunami. And we know everything's getting increasingly technological, right? So how do you flip that on its head and use technology to maybe improve the experience of getting older? So when I finished the program, I had written a paper on older adults and technology, and I was literally Googling older adults and technology, and I found this nonprofit that's downtown, Older Adults Technology Services, and started, they had just opened up a nonprofit center that was a technology-themed senior center, where they teach classes on technology to seniors and all kind of focus on empowering them. A lot of it is related to kind of autonomy and decision making. We had some things around, end of life decisions and being, literate in your healthcare decisions. And then I just ended up getting recruited with my company because they saw I had this experience, and then I had also worked in a community directly. So it was kind of this lucky thing where I had this hybrid of experience of working on the ground in a community. I had a lot of experience working with seniors, but then I had the training from this program, the experience focused on technology. So in my current role now, I would say the ways in which it relates to bioethics. I was just, in fact, at there's a Thrive Center. It's sort of focused on bringing in technology and aging. It's in Louisville, Kentucky, and people are always approaching me like these new startups and new companies with all these really great gadgets and new ideas, and people within my organization also are doing the same thing. And I would say that I'm often kind of the advocate for our residents and making sure that, if we're going to bring in remote patient monitoring, that we make sure that there's consent involved, and that we make sure if someone has, dementia, is this what they would want? Like, are they okay with their kids, their adult children being aware of like how often they're going to the bathroom and how much sleep they're getting and all that stuff? So I would say it overlaps. And then the other thing is just the kind of the patient-centered view of things. I work, my team is called the Optimum Life Team, and our main focus is trying to work on deinstitutionalizing senior living. It's been around for 30 years, and it kind of started out as this idea of retirement communities, but increasingly as people are living longer and getting more frail, our communities are becoming more institutional, so we really try to push back against that. This year we're doing a big push, like an anti-ageism push, training everybody in our communities and everybody in our company to think about aging in a new way and to really combat some of those problematic things that happen. So, yeah.
Hi everyone, so I'm Derek again, and I work for an organization called the Medicare Rights Center. Medicare Rights is as I said, New York-based nonprofit organization, and our work is split into three parts, I would say, mainly. So the advocacy, policy side of things, where we're actively trying to, mainly today it's a lot of defense work because of federal threats to healthcare from the current administration. But it's a lot of work around trying to not only defend against Medicare cuts or Medicaid cuts and things like that, but trying to constantly push the dial forward on improving the program, adding new benefits, things like that. There's the work that we do through education, where we both educate seniors that live in New York City about how their Medicare benefits work, their Medicaid benefits, additional benefits for low-income beneficiaries who do struggle with healthcare costs. And then the advocacy work that we do is really centered around our helpline, which is a national helpline. It serves over around 20,000 people a year, where people call us if they've got questions, if they're dealing with problems, maybe they've got a denial that they recently received from their health coverage, maybe they're new to Medicare and they're just trying to figure out how to sign up for the program, how my insurance is going to change, all of that. So those are sort of our three parts. And then as far as my work there, so I started off in the education department and sort of over time has moved into this more fused education and policy role. I think again, a lot of the work is, as far as the policy stuff goes, is around writing against whatever's going on around Medicaid cuts and Medicare cuts. But I think when it comes to the bioethics side of things and how that sort of plays in, there's some interesting work that we do around just like thinking about health systems and how they're changing and how to improve them. So I think currently in our country, there's a lot of work both from insurers and from doctors, hospitals, providers, where they're trying to figure out how to basically employ some of the things that bioethicists have been talking about for ages. How do we get care coordination in the hospital? How do we get, as an insurer, how do we get every patient to have a care manager so we can make sure to reduce emergency room visits, things like that? How do we actually create a program that gives person-centered care to beneficiaries who are enrolled? And there's a lot of work that we're doing around, and that I'm doing specifically around products for low-income beneficiaries who are enrolled in both Medicare and Medicaid. So people who are typically seniors who are low-income, so they've got both programs, or adults who are disabled who have both programs as well. There's a lot of insurance plans and sort of both state and federal ideas for how to deliver person-centered care, how to actually coordinate care for these people on the ground. And a lot of our work as advocates is trying to say, okay, we're looking at this, we don't see how this is really person-centered care, or we see this as being less work here than in a different model that you've proposed recently. And then also dealing with like consumers themselves, so beneficiaries who are in these programs and are saying, you know, my care manager doesn't actually do any of the things that they say they do. And so being able to contact the insurance or contact the care manager, working through the problems, I think both at a policy level and at an individual level. And then as far as the other question about bioethics, how to sort of use bioethics in getting a job and starting a career, I think part of it for me was, I remember, like I said earlier, I started off on the education team, and my work was a little different when I started than it is right now. I think what Patrick, what Chris were saying earlier about utilizing the fact that the degree is very interdisciplinary, that you need to find a way to sell it to the company or the organization that you're looking to work for. I certainly continued to bring it up as I was working there, found my way into doing some policy work here and there that that was similar to the same sort of work that I did through the bioethics program, and then, you know, slowly transitioned. But yeah.
Great, thank you. Andrew?
So just to give a little more context into my company. So our process, again, we call it abstraction. So what that means is we have kind of a workforce of hundreds of clinicians or former clinicians that have certain types of experience in oncology, and they're using our proprietary software to convert, that's having documents coming in from medical centers across the country. And so they're using our software to convert unstructured medical records into information that can be used by researchers and quantitative scientists to accelerate cancer research. So again, my role is like more on the operations side, overseeing the workforce, managing our processes. And as you can imagine, like there's not every day is going to involve like a huge bioethical question. But the things that are important to remember are, you know, there's a lot of potential concerns that could come up when you're overseeing a workforce that's dealing with very sensitive personal health information every single day. And, you know, as you can also imagine, the level of security that the devices these people are using, et cetera, those are the kinds of things that we need to be cognizant of. But I would say the two like big questions that would come up in my position would be, as this company and as our processes grow, are we being responsible data stewards? And also, as a private organization, are we still, as we continue to scale, are we maintaining the interests of the patient or the interests of the company? Those are the kinds of things that are very real and you have to be aware of. The way I got to this company was actually kind of non-traditional, as not that there is a traditional necessarily pathway for someone who's studying bioethics to take, but I would say even as far as bioethics students go, it's still very non-traditional, because I didn't have any kind of biology or clinical background when I was a student, which I think I was in the minority at the time. So my undergrad was in philosophy and I went straight into the master's program. And something I became very interested in was technology and privacy, and those are the kinds of things we discussed in our classes, like the Facebook mood manipulation experiment. So I kind of, towards the end of the program, I knew that I really wanted to work in tech. And my first job was actually working at a nonprofit organization that focused on privacy compliance in the education technology sector and balancing innovation with data stewardship and privacy and trust and safety. So these are the kinds of things where it wasn't, my first jump into the workforce wasn't necessarily in healthcare, but I still felt like these were really relevant topics that we'd been studying and they had a lot of application to what I was doing. And then my next job after that was working in sort of the compliance space or in the operations space, focusing within the domain of compliance at a background check company, which again, doesn't sound very bioethical when you say it like that. But a lot of it, again, was involving understanding privacy and understanding the rights of the consumer and balancing those interests. So obviously, I do prefer to work in healthcare, and that's kind of why I looped back around to working at Flatiron. But those kinds of things, having those previous experiences and veering off from the healthcare space, I think ultimately helped me develop the skills and experience I need to be where I am now. So that's kind of the path I took and what I'm doing now. But what I would say my advice would be to all of you, or people who are considering careers in bioethics and also technology, would be to really focus on be able to communicate, as others have mentioned, what the value of your experience is and how that ties in to the role you're applying to. But also couple your knowledge and your experience with hard skills, because those really speak volumes. Last year, I actually studied coding part-time on the side while I was working in my previous job. And so I'm not a software engineer or anything, but having that understanding and that background coupled with my bioethics experience, I think ultimately led to making my candidacy stand out in my current role. So I would say just be aware to get that experience, try to figure out what you want, get the experience necessary, and couple it with hard demonstrable skills.
And the coding that you did, was that an online sort of free coding course you took, or what did you do?
No, so it was remote. It was a live remote session. I know myself well enough that I didn't want to commit to flexible on your own kind of schedule. I wanted to have an in-person component to it. But it was sort of a boot camp. It wasn't a full coding boot camp, but it was part-time. And I was fortunate enough that my last company was willing to pay for it, so that was helpful. But again, it was helpful context in the position I had now.
Okay, so as I said, I'm Lillian. I am an attorney in the Health Law Unit at the Legal Aid Society. The Health Law Unit is a very small unit within a very large organization here in New York City. We provide direct legal services to clients regarding access to care, access to services, and access to affordable insurance programs. I actually work a lot in parallel and sometimes crisscross paths with Derek and his organization. So the Medicare world and the Medicaid world, which I work primarily in, are very different in a lot of ways, but I think they speak to each other very nicely. So the area, I say we provide a lot of direct legal services. I think it's primarily for folks who are indigent, and a lot of the people I work with are older and very, very sick. And New York has a really robust Medicaid program, as well as a robust program called the Essential Plan. It is, I would say New York and California are probably the most progressive two states in terms of the kinds of health insurance that they provide to people who might not otherwise be able to afford insurance. However, there are still a lot of problems with how Medicaid in particular is managed in New York, and so I work a lot in that. I would say, so a lot of the policy work that I do comes from seeing what's going on with my individual clients, and kind of pulling from that, like what are the themes that are happening within our unit. And then, you know, with all of the great stuff that's going on in our federal government at the moment, a lot of the work I do has to do with immigrant access to healthcare, and trying to ensure that all of the stuff that the federal government is pulling at the moment isn't having a chilling effect on people who are very, very sick, and trying to adjust their immigration status. I took a few notes because I want to make sure I covered everything. So I think my path to getting to this position is in some ways very non-traditional, and then in some ways, I guess, one of the more traditional paths on this panel. But I went to law school after working for a year after college. And in law school, I kind of always had this public interest Jones, and I was doing a lot of public interest internships. And my third year of law school, I did a bioethics certificate program, as well as a public health law and policy course. And what I really enjoyed about the bioethics certificate program is I was in a class with not just law students, who can be great, but can be a lot. So I was in class with doctors and lawyers and social workers, et cetera, kind of exactly like the bioethics program here. And I really liked learning to be able to talk about these kind of really tough concepts with people who didn't use the same vocabulary that I was using. And I think, you know, as students in this program, as alums in this program, we all do this all the time, and we have to learn how to talk to one another. I think to everyone's point to sing the chorus before, I think selling yourself, being able to talk about this program is something you really need to do when you're looking for positions, but I think it's something that you are probably really used to doing, having been in kind of an environment where you are talking to people who might be coming at something from a totally different perspective than you're coming at it from. Anyway, I did that in law school. I worked in legal services for the elderly for a bit after law school, and what I was learning was that a lot of my clients, who were similarly to my clients now, indigent and elderly for the most part, is the work that I was doing for them, the very kind of specific work, wasn't enough. They had all sorts of healthcare issues that were going on outside of the actual work I was doing for them. So I decided I wanted to go back to school and kind of think about these issues, and so I came to the bioethics program. I got the master's, and then I actually worked for a while in Samir's role as the associate director, and I think that was such a wonderful experience because I actually really did have to sell the bioethics program, and I had to talk to some of you guys, but a lot of people from different backgrounds, and kind of learn how bioethics can help can help you get to where you want to go, even if you don't necessarily know how to articulate that before you get into this program. I think for me, one of the reasons I went back to practicing law was, being videotaped while saying this, but was after the November 2016 election. I was upset, and I think, you know, I really wanted to kind of take tangible steps to help people who are really vulnerable and really vulnerable to attack. I think one of the things that has motivated me the most from what we learned in bioethics, you know, you learn about the 4 principles, and I think for me, justice and access to healthcare is so important. So that's what sort of motivated me and has gotten me to where I am today. Am I missing something?
Any advice?
Any advice? So I think as everyone has said, I think being able to talk about what your narrative is, why you studied bioethics, what you got out of it that is tangible and that can create change in a corporation, in a nonprofit, that can help move things forward and progress things, I think is really important. I think taking a step back and thinking about what it is that brought you to bioethics and what it is that you really like about it can very much help you kind of articulate for yourself what your next position is going to be, what you're going to go for, how you're going to talk about it with potential employers. I think one of the things that we, you know, as graduates or students in this program need to sell ourselves on is our ability to talk to different populations of people, to talk to patients, to talk to clients, to talk to each other, and to have a common language and be able to change our language, change our vocabulary a little bit when we talk to one another. And I think that that is a huge skill. It's a skill I use all the time. I don't just deal with lawyers, I deal with my clients, I deal with people who are advocates, who are parents, who just come at problems from different points of view. So I would say sell yourself on that.
Hi, this is Paola. I am a clinical and researcher fellow at Montefiore Hospital, Center for Bioethics. So this is a center for bioethics that has like 3 missions. One of them is like to provide clinical ethics consultation. The second one is like to do research, and the last one is like education. Since Montefiore and Einstein also have a master program in bioethics. So basically right now my job is very multitasking. I'm still like in a period of a transition, as I was mentioning. Basically, just a little bit of background. So I come from academia. I was prior to that a postdoctoral fellow at Fordham University in philosophy. So basically I have everything to learn in terms of clinical background because I'm a non-clinician. I work with 2 lawyers and 2 physicians. And basically so Montefiore has like a very long tradition of clinical ethics consultation, a very strong one, and they have like 300 consultations per year. And basically, usually the team is consulted by physicians who are dealing with very strong moral dilemma, very difficult cases actually to face. That could be in terms of like refusal of treatment, overriding like the patient's autonomy or not for their best interest. That could be like navigating like in terms of navigating with the family about surrogate decision making. Plenty of different like ethical dilemma, and what I was very surprised about is the fact that so they work extremely closely with the medical team, and I was expecting that basically, I don't know, that that there could be like some reluctance from the physician to work with the bioethics center and so on. On the contrary, like physicians are extremely happy to get the support and recommendation from the Centers for Bioethics. So we try to basically to investigate with the different team involved in care of a patient, and then to know a little bit more about the values and belief of the patient, and then to provide like some recommendation that is like ethically appropriate. So the way I got into that, that's, I can tell you that I was not expecting at all, like, when I started the program at least, I wasn't expecting at all, like, being a clinical ethicist, or at least in transition for being one. For a very simple reason, I thought that by being a philosopher and like not having a clinical background, well, basically that I couldn't get access to that kind of career. And right now, on an everyday basis, I can tell you that my life is quite complicated because I have to learn like all of the medical vocabulary, the medical jargon, and that's extremely challenging for someone who doesn't come from that. But also like extremely stimulating, and also because like this is a very interdisciplinary team, and like not only the lawyers and physicians they are extremely happy like to have someone a little bit thinking like from a different, like complete different approach, and like having like a philosophical voice on different topics. Basically then like the reason why I got interested so much into clinical ethics while I was doing the master is because like I wanted like a job that was like multitasking, and I wanted like to keep going with research. I wanted to keep going with teaching. I'm not currently teaching, but in the long run, that's the plan. Basically to combine like clinical ethics consultation, teaching, and research. And I thought that was the best format, because right now that's very rare that you find an institution where there is like a clinical ethics consultation service, so to speak. More often like a hospital and institutions, they have a bioethics committee, but not like a clinical ethics consultation service. That's pretty rare. So, and I also wanted like, I'm not like at all rejecting my former background like as like a researcher and a philosopher or whatsoever, but like I wanted a job where I could exercise more of my humane skills, and exercising like different things such as empathy, compassion, and so on. And I found a place where like those skills are extremely validated by the environment, which is very gratifying, I feel. And also I needed, like, I wanted to work in a team. And I love doing research, and I want to keep going doing research by myself and so on. But I also, wanted to have the pleasure, like, to work with a team. So that was that's a good place for that. My advice is basically like, one of the questions I've been asked during the interview was like, what are the classes you have taken before applying for this job? Did you tailor like your curriculum before like applying for the job and so on? And even if that's always kind of artificial and retrospective, because I can tell you that from day one of the master, I didn't know exactly where I will apply for. Well, to find a way like to make a narrative, a story, where basically your unique background, your unique path makes like an original contribution for the discussion. And also, I was like very genuine about the fact that, you know, I mean, like, I'm like very new in bioethics. I started like the program 1 year ago, actually, the master. I didn't finish it yet. And I was very genuine about the fact that I want to learn, I want like to be trained, and that I need the help of my mentors, my colleagues and so on in order to do so. And I can tell you that the people who have interviewed me, I immediately felt that actually, I mean, one of them like said at the end of the interview, well, you know, I've been there, and even if I had finished the master, well, I mean, I was still like completely new and not knowing yet what I will be doing, and I've learned on the ground basically. And another advice is basically like being aware if you are interested into a clinical ethics consultation, and I think that's absolutely wonderful actually, like this job that I'm learning about. Well, there are like some fellowship that could be like a transition for you between a master, so to speak, and a job, that are offered at different places. Montefiore, very likely in the proximate future, Cleveland, Oakland, and so on. Yeah.
Hello again, my name is Marilyn. The diverse things that everyone does here is the exact reason why I got really interested in bioethics. So my undergrad was in biomedical science. I did that in England. And there was not one time where I heard about bioethics or ethics in research. It was a basic science course, very theory heavy. And if we did do any practical work, it was in anatomy and, you know, some bench science. So human subjects research or the role of ethics in research was never something that crossed my mind. But I learned about it from a panel that was put together like this. And so I deeply value arrangements like this, because that's what put the seed in my mind. There was a woman who talked about the work that she did. She was working in the pharmaceutical industry, in regulatory affairs. And she had said something that resonated with me, which was she enjoyed hearing about research, but she wasn't really interested in doing any herself. So she wanted to stay in that field, and that's exactly how I felt. I didn't see myself going on doing any kind of research, but I find research very interesting. I have great respect for people who do research, the dedication and the time that they put into that work, especially the ideas that they're able to come up with. I consider myself the kind of person who can take an idea that you have come up with and help you refine it. Coming up with my own unique ideas, I'm not very good at that. So I did some research to see what exactly I could do in school, what kind of training I could get to get me in that space where I'm in the research space, but not exactly doing the research. That's how I found out about the bioethics field and the bioethics program at Columbia. And then, you know, the other thing that appealed to me was the interdisciplinary nature of the program, where you're not just learning about one thing, you get input from different established fields already. So is the IRB internship still something that goes on in the program? Okay, so like I said at the beginning, I work at the IRB at Mount Sinai. I think that as far as bioethics goes, even if the name bioethics is not in an IRB job, it's a typical bioethics job. Like if you send out a resume to an IRB office and they see that you have a degree in bioethics, no one's going to need you to explain what that is. No one's going to need you to sell yourself. You're already, you know, a price candidate, I would say. What we do at the IRB, I would just say very briefly, is we are responsible for ethical oversight of human subject research at Mount Sinai. And so we have a vast portfolio of research studies that happen at Sinai, and our day-to-day is basically just reviewing these protocols using not only the federal, state, and any other local regulations that have been set in place. We also use our ethical know-how and make sure that studies are designed ethically before we allow them to happen at Mount Sinai. And where bioethics comes in for me, I mean, obviously it's very related, but I find that this program gave me the skills that I needed to think about problems and to think about different issues or whatever I have in front of me differently, to be able to ask the right questions. There were thoughts that I have now when I hear something that I wouldn't necessarily have thought about if I didn't go through the program. Certainly when we review research proposals, we are looking at them against the 4 bioethical principles. So is the plan here respecting autonomy? So how is the consenting being done? Are people given their consent to participate in research studies? Are they capable of providing consent? It's very interesting. We had one study proposal that came through where they are doing the study to test if certain patients in the ED are capable of giving consent. So already the notion is that these people can't give consent, but we're going to consent them into a study to see if they can give consent. So that was a hot topic of discussion. The risk-benefit ratio, we look at that. We want to make sure that subjects aren't going through a tremendous risk for something that isn't beneficial. We want to make sure that we have a favorable risk-benefit ratio. Justice, what's the question that's been answered and what's the population that you're using to answer this question? Where Mount Sinai is located, we are in Spanish Harlem, so we have a large Spanish-speaking population. So one of the fights that we have back and forth with researchers is why are you not including any Spanish-speaking subject at the very least because of where we are. So those are the sorts of things that we think about on the daily, and now it comes very naturally to me where on the job, when I'm training a person who doesn't have a bioethics background, I find that this is something that you have to teach. And so this is one of the advantages that the program gives for working in this kind of office. Advice that I would give for if you're interested in entering the IRB world, I would say that, again, the IRBs are quite established now. If you don't know about Dr. Klitzman's book, The Ethics Police, pick it up and read about it. I would say that, so I did the IRB internship when I was in the bioethics program, and I found that really helpful. It helped me see if this is something that I would be interested in doing at all. And it also helped open the door for me when I started looking for jobs after the program, because I had that internship on my resume and I also had contacts in the field. Bioethics is a small field and IRBs in that is really small. So in New York City, chances are most IRB professionals know of themselves. When a person moves from Mount Sinai, they're going to NYU, they're going to Columbia, they're going to Einstein. There aren't that many places for you to move to, especially in New York. So having that contact it was really helpful for me to getting this job that I have now. Another advice that I would have, so if you don't do the internship through the program, I find that working in an office, it's many IRB offices, most IRB offices may not have official or traditional internship programs because it's pretty difficult to come up with what kind of training you give an intern to be able to do the typical work that an IRB professional does. But I would say that reaching out to even if it's just to ask to attend an IRB meeting, just so you can see what a meeting's like. You can attend one, you can attend a couple, and then from there you have a rapport. They know you, they know who you are. If you want to ask for an informational interview and sit down with a professional and ask them questions about what they do day to day, and then you're hearing, in having those conversations with them, you're hearing any problem areas they might have, any specific places where you can insert yourself and say, well, I think I can take on this project and help you out with. At the IRB, one of the things that we are constantly measuring ourselves on is the turnaround time. The amount of time that it takes us to actually sit with a project and approve it. It's something that researchers want to start their studies yesterday, but we can't do sloppy work. We need to sit down with it. It's not just one person that looks at it. Many eyes look at research protocols before they're approved. So that's one of the things that we are constantly working on getting better at. If that's something that you hear and you think you might be interested in it, and you come in, you do that, and then as long as you're in the environment, then you get to learn, you get to pick up different things that will help you when you're interviewing for a full-time job, a full-time opportunity. There's the body that organizes conferences for IB professionals, Public Responsibility in Medicine and Research. They have webinars on their website that I find really entertaining and helpful when it comes to research ethics. You might have to pay for some of them, but if you're able to find that funding, that's a helpful place to go. Another place would be irbforum.org. It's a free forum where IB professionals, every day you get messages in your inbox, people just talking about different studies or scenarios that they've never seen before, and so they come to this forum where they have other people in the field and people just brainstorm, because even though we have set regulations, and actually our regulations changed last year, and they were implemented in January of this year. So we're in an interesting space now where some of the things that we used to do before, we're doing them differently now, which is good, it's interesting. But regulations are written the way they are, and then most of them are subject to and open to interpretation. One person interprets it differently than another. Then we run into the issue where one IRB approves something and another IRB in a different state doesn't approve it because they don't interpret the regulations the same way. So that forum, I find it interesting, even if you don't work in the field just yet, but just to see the sorts of things that people talk about and the sorts of solutions that people suggest on that website. It's just good to keep yourself abreast of things that are going on in the field. And I think a third advice that I would give, just in terms of updating yourself so that you can talk, so that you can say the right things and speak right when you go to an interview, would be just reading research journals for research ethics. The Hastings Center has the Journal of Ethics and Human Research, I think. That's a good one. You can see up-to-date things that people have done research on and read up on them. I think that's it. That's about it.
Arielle?
I wanted to say that it was, really terrific to hear everyone speak who's in the room there. And I learned a lot just from listening to you all. I also just personally wanted to thank you, Lillian, because I was, you were working in the program when I applied to the program. And so thank you for all the work you did back then. But more than that, thank you for now helping immigrants to get good health care. I appreciate that. I take that personally. I have some personal family experience with that as well. So that's terrific. I guess I just wanted to echo what Andrew said about coupling your knowledge and experience with hard skills. Because I think kind of outside of the academic world, even inside the academic world a lot of the time, but sometimes in the academic world, you can sort of be a bioethicist only. And I think that outside of academia, bioethics will be a very valuable tool for you. You will spend a lot of time explaining kind of what you bring to the table, what your knowledge and experience in this area, how it's helpful. Often with working with different kinds of people and the interdisciplinary nature of it for sure, but also having a certain kind of principled approach to decision making and to being aware of societal aspects of science that others aren't aware of. I think that after studying bioethics, you you read news differently. You interpret current events differently. You're able to think outside the box and outside of your personal area of expertise, whether it's medicine, law, biology, social work, you know, and any area that you're in, you do bring something different to it. And I think this kind of, it seems really trivial, but someone mentioned elevator pitch and kind of practicing that. You do have to be clear on kind of what you do. I think that's very important. And it's going to be different for everybody and will depend on the context that you work in. So a lot of people think that I'm a lawyer. They start talking to me and they think I'm going to give them legal advice, or that I'm a compliance officer. And so you just did the nature of the kind of interdisciplinary nature of bioethics means that you have to explain what you do, and that's going to be different for everybody depending on how you approach it. But I think because it's so interdisciplinary, you have to explain which discipline you kind of know the most about, and how you can help people. But it's not because the industry is not aware of bioethics. It's because I think they're not used to it being a specific skill set. You sort of assume that it's part of everyone's training.
So the floor is open.
Could I ask a question to Arielle? Your bioethics committee, is that made up of internal people?
Yeah, we don't have a bioethics committee. I know some companies do, but we don't. We work differently. What we've done, we do a few different things, and it's by design. We operate a research ethics consultation service for individuals and for teams, typically, you know, kind of drug development research teams. And so who gives advice, right? So for minor issues, it could be myself and others with training in bioethics. We don't consider ourselves a committee, but we've also formed a network of people from a variety of disciplines around the company that have some expertise and interest in bioethics, and we turn to them. And in addition to that, we have external advisors outside of the company, including a standing ethics advisory group, a scientific ethics advisory group that is, you know, not an internal committee, and but a group of advisors, because obviously we have our own conflicts and biases, and external advice is very, very welcome. So I hope that answers your question. We don't have an internal standing bioethics committee that has to approve anything at all. We consider ourselves advisory experts. We give advice, but we don't. You know, the subject matter experts make the decisions. So very different than like a governance board. So we also help to develop policies and to enable decision making related to investigational medicine access. We do a lot of work related to investigational medicine access, whether that's compassionate use or other kinds of investigational medicine access. And we work really hard to ensure that access is equitable around the world to the extent possible, and that it's done fairly. And their bioethics knowledge and skills is very, very valuable, as you can imagine. We write a lot of externally facing positions on areas related to clinical research ethics, and sometimes very specific areas. For example, how we use genetic research, how we use genetics biosamples, how we run our biobank, things like this, how we respect patients and their data and their samples. So you know, we play a role in those kinds of positions and policies. and in communicating those to research subjects, to scientists, to kind of others who will work in research with us. We bring in the necessary experts. So bioethics, I think a lot of it is related to bringing together kind of stakeholders and experts who normally don't talk to each other. So people who are really different from each other and normally wouldn't be in a room together, we put them in a room together to help create good policies in the interests of patients. We drive some kind of initiatives and projects that have a strong bioethics component, those are quite diverse in nature. We also do some like internal education on bioethics. We hold sort of informational sessions on a variety of topics. So, including things like things that are quite variable from kind of a new policy, something that's happening in the government that's relevant to bioethics and research, or we might even talk about historical events that are relevant to drug research, like the history of Henrietta Lacks. And, we sometimes have a book club or a movie club, and we just want to bring some perspectives into conversations and deliberation.
So we actually have a question. She's asking, reflecting back on when you were all students, what were some of the most valuable resources available to you, and what do you wish you accessed more?
So what were the most valuable resources, and what do you wish you accessed more? Anyone?
All right, yeah, I'll go for it. So there's a career advancement office on Columbia's campus. I'm pretty sure it's called career advancement. That is extremely useful. I know I spoke to a counselor there a lot during my second year when I was trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to be graduating. What am I going to do? I want to stay in New York. I want to be able to work here. And so they were very useful in sort of I think when I was in the program, I had a very, and probably to a certain extent still do, had a strong idea, okay, I'm going to go out of the program, I'm gonna be a writer, I'm gonna be at home writing essays and making money that way, and it's gonna work out just fine. And I think it was helpful to be talking to a counselor who was able to give me a more realistic mindset about how to do things, but also talk to me about interview skills, sort of different organizations that I might want to look into that might be able to look at my background and what I've done in the program and actually say, yes, you should be hired here.
Lillian, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think the most valuable skill or thing that I did in the program is just to learn from my classmates. I think everyone comes with such different life experience and different kind of career level experience, and I think that goes a long way. I would say the somewhat other side of the coin to that, what I wish I did more, I wish I had taken more advantage of the alumni and spoken with people, just kind of figuring out what the heck you can do with a degree in bioethics. And I think panels like this are really, really helpful. But I think also just realizing that all of the alums, whether they're in New York or elsewhere, are human and have been in the same place you are. Just reach out to them and ask them questions. And I think most of us are very, very willing to yap, obviously.
Other questions?
Well, I would add similarly, and I want to emphasize this because I know I didn't take advantage of this. Your professors are experts. They're highly knowledgeable people and they're willing to help you. That is their job. If you're like me, you're going to be totally silent, quiet, in the back of the room the whole lecture. And you know what? It might feel safe and comfortable when it's happening, but don't do it because you're going to regret it. And You want to have that face time. You want to talk to your professors, develop a relationship. They can help you get to where you want to be. So use that. It's one of the reasons we come to Columbia or something like that, I guess.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, I feel like I did research with Dr. Klitzman. I was a TA, and also just even outside of the program with the interdisciplinary nature, when you have a different class, just networking and talking to the professors and asking them what kind of research they're doing, and just finding as many different ways when you're in this program to kind of work for things, you know, work on things, research things, and try different things out so you can understand what you like.
Yeah. I took most of my electives up at Mailman because so many of those classes are relevant to our program. So I just was like, I'm going to treat myself like an honorary Mailman student. I went to their events, I talked to the professors. At that time, they didn't really know there was a bioethics program. I think we worked on like getting more connection between us and Mailman, but I was just like, I'm going to help myself to all the Mailman resources. I'm going to crash your career fair. Like, there were so many. Mailman, I also felt like the students there in the MPH program skewed very young. So a lot of them were very much in the same boat that I was, looking for entry-level positions. They were great classmates. So, you know, when I was in the program, it was about 20 bioethics students. It was great. I got very close with a lot of them, but it was also great to have this network of other students, and we could kind of compare and contrast our perspectives. You know, I took a public health law class. There was so much up at Mailman that's relevant to this program as well. So definitely, I didn't take as much at the law school or some of like SEPA or Teachers College. I did, I think, based on just what I was interested in, but in addition to this program, just crash everything you can at the other colleges. I mean, Columbia, the graduate schools are, I think, a little bit siloed. But just, you know, take advantage of everything else that's going on at Columbia, because there's so many graduate students here and really interesting, smart people, and you know, there is it's good to focus on bioethics, but also, you know, look at resources beyond our program.
No, I just wanted to add that, yeah, I would never have gotten like this fellowship without the help of Robert Klitzman, Arthur Kaflik, and David Hoffman, and like so basically like we were preparing like together like the interview, and that made like a very huge difference because basically, you know, I could like you know, provide some facts or some, I mean, like to have like a, I mean, to prepare the interview basically with like your mentor. Yeah.
Other questions?
So yeah, there is a slight correction from the Career Design Lab. It's actually called the Career Design Lab.
Yes.
They wanted us to let everyone know.
Okay.
And their email address is careerdesignlab@columbia.edu. We actually have one of their representatives who represents our program here with us today, Nicole, as well. So feel free to speak with her afterwards. There is a question from Michael Alvarez from a labor market perspective. How might AI and machine learning factor in as an expanding area of opportunity?
Well, just it sounds like a few of you deal with technology.
I mean, this is a much heavier question than I personally came prepared to answer. But I mean, I would just throw out there, you know, if you're working in technology, AI, machine learning, they're happening. You know, it's a regular occurrence. It's going to be something you'll be working with. I mean, I know that like, I think one thing that's particularly interesting to me about AI and machine learning is sort of our ability, or like our aspiration to develop algorithms that can help us better make decision making. And that can often mean ethical decision making. Like I know, for example, you know, and I can't speak too much about this, but like algorithms are being used to help evaluate evidence in the criminal justice system. And so that, you know, a question around that is like, can we defer to like a set of numbers to evaluate as credible evidence for a case? Like these are things that are coming up. So, I mean, take advantage of your studies now, I would say, and like dive deeper into those kind of issues, because you could wind up being your job one day.
I should add that we're developing a new course on AI, health and ethics, but there are also courses in applied analytics that teach skills in machine learning and that are open to our students as well. We have time for a few more questions. Arjun.
This is for anyone on the panel, on a much lighter note. I was wondering, because I think someone mentioned this, we have this training in bioethics, and you see these issues pop up in the news, and these bioethics issues pop up immediately for us. Do you find in your day-to-day that other people don't have that experience, that they just kind of just don't even see these come up, and you're kind of specially equipped? Because sometimes I'm not really interacting with a lot of people outside of the program, and I don't really have that perspective.
I think the media loves them personally. Like every time I turn on CNN, either Dr. Klitzman's being interviewed or what's the gentleman from NYU?
Art
Yeah. I'm like, oh, what's it today? I do think the media really likes to oversimplify them, but they're sexy. It's kind of like bioethics sells for the media. So I think they're out there. I just think it's usually like a very oversimplified, like 30-second segment. You just get a few sound bites, but I think they're out there. I think people are interested and aware of them.
I do think that our training just gives us that. You forget what it was like before you came into the program, how your mind works. Even, not just with the people that you work with or the people you surround yourself with, but like with friends and family, you find that you have to explain things, and even then it's really difficult to get it. It's like, no, it's not as easy as that. And it could be as straightforward as when the news came with the genetically edited babies, and it's like, well, what's the problem with this? It's great, right? It's, it's going to solve this and this and this. And it's like, no, you have to take a step back, and how about this? How about that? Like I said, in the work that we do, I have Myra Hyder's here, and we work in the same office, and I think we're the only two people in that office that have bioethics training. And so when we have new staff come on, I'm involved in training the new staff. You find that in addition to training people on how the office works and the things that we look for, we're also teaching people constantly how to think about these issues, because there's nothing written down. That's where the separation comes out. There's nothing written down for you to follow. It's not written in the regulations. You have to think about it. And when you have that training, you've done it for a year, you've sat in classes and you've talked to people and heard different perspectives. When you see an issue, you hear those voices, and you can make any argument from any point of view. As a bioethicist, I find.
I would love to echo and mimic a couple things that my colleagues have mentioned. So regarding the media, and I feel like the people who most are interested a lot of the time, unfortunately, in bioethical issues are people who know the least about them. And I think that probably spans a lot of different topics, not just bioethics. But, and on the flip side of the coin, people who probably touch these things the most and are brilliant scientifically or technologically often have no regard for them or understanding of them whatsoever. And so, one of the great things about this program is it's training people and sending people out into the workforce who do have this understanding. So I would place the burden on us and on you that be an advocate, try to explain and communicate the reality and how complex the issues are. People love to oversimplify things so that it can be something that they can understand a little bit easier. But be sure to be an advocate for change, especially if you're in the private sector. A company is in a lot of ways a community, and the things that are driving their decisions are things that a large portion or certain key members of the company feel about a certain issue. So if you have that face time with people, be sure to use your degree in your everyday life. Don't feel bad about doing that.
So one question, yes.
I had another.
Go ahead.
So, I was wondering, sometimes do you feel when you come upon these issues, or whenever you're, do you think you're ever too critical as a result of being part of this program? Sometimes I think we see a new technological advancement, but I always try to think like, oh, what are the problems? And I wonder, like, am I being too critical about a certain thing? And I was wondering how you felt about that.
I wouldn't say overcritical, but one thing that I think, and I kind of started the program pretty young, was like viewing ethics in a vacuum versus kind of going within to the real world and working for a company and understanding, like, I mean, it's really easy to kind of say it should be this way, it should be that way, but understanding how much politics and how complicated it is to get things to change the right way. So I don't think most of these things, I do think they're so complicated, so I think it's important to be critical, but it's also important to kind of be aware of how the context within, that you're talking about, and that, companies want to make money, and as much as we want to tell them that they should do the right thing, we have to figure out how to connect making money to doing the right thing, because ultimately, that increases the business too.
And I think that comes from experience. So I don't think that looking at things critically or being taught to look at things critically is in itself a bad thing, just because at some point it will balance out when you go into the world and have that experience.
I think I would call it a healthy skepticism. I don't get into this so much on the tech side. I get into it in a policy side where, city, like very, very recently, in New York City, we've been talking a lot about single-payer healthcare, and that's sort of like the buzzword right now. Everyone wants the state to pass, well, not everyone, but a lot of people want the state to pass a single-payer system so we can enroll as many people in insurance as possible, and that is a great line to be able to tell everyone. But the problems with trying to create a single-payer health system in just the state are numerous. And immediately in reading about that sort of thing, I was confronted with all these questions. Okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Et cetera, right? And what did I find? But like a month later, Brand Corporation, which is like this research group, comes out with this like large paper about all the problems with the single payer systems that have been proposed in New York. I think it's really useful that we approach whether it's tech or anything else with a lot of skepticism, because we're asking the questions that someone needs to ask. But then at the same time, I think we need to remind ourselves that we can't think about the real world as if everything exists in a vacuum.
I mean, I think just to Derek's point, there are people at the other end of this equation, and I think that we are all in a very privileged place to be able to be critical about, whether it's a policy advancement, a technological advancement, a scientific advancement, whatever it is. But I think it's just important to remember that there are patients, there are research subjects who are humans at the other end of the spectrum, and so being able to be critical is not only important, but I think it just sort of maintains the humanity in all of this. So
I would just say that, like, more often than not, people err on the side of not being critical enough. So go for it.
Yeah.
So just as a final question then, I just want to come back to very concretely in terms of a pitch. So many of our students are going to go out there and explain bioethics. So if I was an employer and you just say, you did this bioethics thing, what are the skills you got that you can bring to my job or this job or my company? What would you each say, or thoughts on that? Some of you answered this a little bit, but any?
I mean, my company's big on solving problems via analytical frameworks, and that was big when I was interviewing. I said in bioethics, there are a lot of frameworks. The most simple one is the 4 principles of bioethics. So to me, that's a good answer. Is I learned how to look at complicated issues and break them down using well-established frameworks. So that's one thing I think I probably said in a bunch of interviews that I got a lot of good nods and impressive looks.
That's good. Yeah, I think for me, and it's going to depend on what you're looking for, but for me, it's the interdisciplinary nature. And in my role, like, I'm working with people in IT, I'm working with people at the community level who are caregivers, I'm working with clinicians. So being able to work with all those different people and kind of tell a good story is really important for what I do. So I think just stressing that you can talk to a lot of different types of people and Yeah.
Yeah, I think, with my current role, I think a lot of the work I do is around research, and I picked up a lot of research skills from the coursework that we have here, where we are constantly writing papers and trying to defend our own points. And so it was being able to look into the information on my own, break it down on my own, and then be able to explain it to my superiors. So.
Yeah, I'm at this point, based on theirs, I'm not going to have anything unique, but I would say that the most important things in terms of that would be valuable to an employer are your ability and your heightened ability to, based on this program, to break down interesting and unique problems and to be able to understand differing opinions and to be able to, form your own and advocate for that. And also, again, I'm going to reiterate, especially in a technology company, I feel like being able to work with people who have different types of backgrounds, interdisciplinary fields. In tech, we call it cross-functional working. So if you use that in a tech interview, they'll love it. They'll love you. Being able to work cross-functionally and in an interdisciplinary fashion is really important.
All of the above, and I guess I would say I've learned how to issue spot more quickly and more efficiently, and I think what's really important for my job is coalition building, and that means bringing in people from every walk of life so that you can accomplish a common goal.
I would say to be capable of making a back and forth between the realm of norms and the realm of theory and apply it to concrete and very specific situations, and at the same time to not give up on those norms and those ethical norms, what is appropriate in such situation, but also trying to navigate with the complexity, the contingency of all of those very specific decisions.
I would say two things: critical thinking and attention to detail are things that you shouldn't leave out. You sell yourself very easily in those because most of what we do is hidden in the details. Most of the things that we ask questions about are things that people don't see easily because it's written between the lines.
Arielle?
I wouldn't underestimate how hard this is. It's really hard to explain to people who haven't done bioethics what bioethics is and why it matters above and beyond kind of somebody's other training, and why we're not all ethical, right? So I think what has been most effective for me is bringing in concrete examples, saying, well, this is what we study in bioethics, and this is what some of our skills are, and let me give you an example of a situation where people struggle to make a decision or to move forward in real life, and here's how we used our knowledge and skills of bioethics to help solve that problem. So have a few of those.
That's great. And of course, there are examples where things were not done well, the opioid crisis and Purdue selling drugs and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, any final question? If not, please, first of all, thank you so much. And please join me in thanking